Judge, you should vote for the opposition based merely on the blatant violations of the entire debate process made by the proposition. Not only did the proposition submit their rebuttal a full 12 hours past the deadline, but they also had the audacity to exceed the time limit on top of that in their rebuttal. The opposition would have been forgiving if this were the first video submission, but the proposition's ability to successfully publish their opening on Monday clearly indicates they had no difficulty in the operational procedures of posting a video on time. Furthermore, given the time difference between San Diego, where the proposition resides, and New York, where we reside, if the proposition were to have posted their video when you could realistically consider East Coast residents to be resting, the opposition would have been understanding. Instead, the opposition waited until approximately 4 p.m. East Coast time to post their video, giving the opposition an insufficient amount of time to prepare to debate this round. Half of my day is already over, and it is unfair for me to have to dedicate time to research that I could have done earlier just because the proposition was unable to post their video in a sufficient manner. The time that the opposition originally had allotted to doing this assignment, that was well within the deadline period, has now passed, and the opposition is now being forced to abandon other academic obligations in order to make up for the proposition not posting their video on time. The only reason the opposition has even decided to continue this debate is because I have not received notification from my professor on whether I would be docked points in my personal grade if I decided not to. However, in the context of this debate round, the opposition argues that the proposition's inability to give us sufficient time to prepare is grounds for forfeiture, and they should lose the round based solely on this reality. Most importantly, the opposition only receives a chance to speak twice during this debate round, and has had to use valuable time, now counting 1 minute and 50 seconds, I could have been using to debate the actual content of this round merely to highlight all of the unfortunate and unforgivable errors on the side of the proposition. Voting for the proposition would jeopardize the entire integrity of this academic exercise, and a vote in favor of the proposition should be seen as a support for late work, and encouraging others to utilize this strategy in the future of these debate processes, instead of sticking to the content of the argument. This would create an environment where students would intentionally submit late work in order to gain an advantage, and penalize the students who are diligently doing their assignments and turning them in on time. Proposition failed to sufficiently defend their inability to cite as well, and I have no idea what they were talking about when calling out the opposition for doing the same thing. The judge should refer to the numerous amount of name drops throughout the opposition's opening speech, as well as the citations in the assigned section on the bottom of my opening speech. Proposition questions the opposition's definition of this house, but the opposition only had to define this house because the proposition failed to deliver on their obligations to do so in their opening speech. Proposition can't argue unfairness due to a mistake of their own. The judge should also disregard any arguments made from the proposition from this point on regarding global warming and world hunger, as the proposition did not address either in their rebuttal. The opposition now does not feel they have sufficient time to address any of the proposition's remaining rebuttal arguments based on having to waste approximately half of their speech strictly going over procedural arguments, without the opposition's arguments being seen as incomplete and therefore inferior if they were to go on. I urge the judge to support the integrity of this academic process and not support late, uncited work that has exceeded the time limit, and uphold the sacredness of this exercise by instead voting for the opposition, who has diligently followed all the rules laid out in this activity.